I want to say welcome everybody to another side quest with Trigger Talk TV, and we are here with Dee Patel, who is a
What's going on,
game
guys?
producer, right?
Yep,
Actually,
yep,
you know what?
yep.
Tell us who you are. You can just tell us about yourself.
Wow.
Ha!
Crap. All right. Yeah, my name is D. I think a lot of your chat knows me as the D-pad that's just been rocking up in all of your streams, keys especially during the week because it just kind of fits with my schedule of work. But yeah, my name is D. I've been working in the games industry for 16 years now. It's my 16th year. I
Wow.
started off back in 2005 and I got really lucky. I got a kind of 0 hour contract. I don't, do they have those in the US?
A 0 hour
Um,
what even is that?
it's kind of like you basically work until they say that they don't need you anymore.
Okay.
So it's
Contract,
a
We have
callback.
we
It's like a contract, like a.
contract worker.
And so I got a job as a tester at EA, and which was wild because I originally wanted to go further into my education and potentially do a master's. And here comes some people that were like, "Hey, we need testers. Do you want a job?" I'm like, "Yep," and that was it. That was it. And started testing
Wow.
games in 2005. So did that for a good while. Moved on up, and I've been everywhere. I was at EA for almost 5 years.
Hmm.
Was at Blizzard for 2 years. Then Ubisoft out in Singapore for just under 2.5 years.
Singapore.
I've been everywhere. Yeah, I've been everywhere. That's
I
kind of
didn't
like
even.
the. Huh?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't even know they had an office in Singapore.
Oh, dude, yeah. Like the Singapore office is nuts. So if you ever enjoyed Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, all the sailing, all the underwater, all the ocean tech, all the good shit in AC4 was made by Ubisoft Singapore. And I say that with the utmost bias considering I was there. Uh, but Ubisoft has studios all over the world. I think they've got a studio in the Philippines, they've got studios in China, all throughout Europe. They're huge. I think that Ubisoft is huge, and I don't think people understand that sometimes when they compare them to Activision and EA. But Ubisoft is huge. Um, but yeah, just like many of y'all, like I got into games at a really young age because I am of that age group that got the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo,
Hmm.
all the systems, all the generations. I've been there
Mm.
since Atari. And it was always a dream to work in games, like always. But
Right.
back when I was younger, it was just unrealistic. It's not like it is today. It was unrealistic that I could get a job in games. So I went to college for psychology, got a degree in psychology. And then I was just like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do.
Oh,
This job came in and I was like, that's it. That's my foot in the door. And I've got to do
Nice.
everything I can to not be the lowest tier employee. I've got to move up, got to get somewhere.
that's kind of
And that
crazy
was it.
how that worked out. That
Nice.
you didn't even go
That
to
would.
school for something that you wanted to do, right? That was kind of like your plan B ish, what you went to school for, or you.
Kind of like I've always been interested in psychology and the mind and us and our psyches and as a whole.
Hmm.
I think it just comes from how I grew up. Like I've lived all over the world. My parents are immigrants, so I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Texas. I moved out to Texas when I was 13 years old. And so constantly being on the outside of things, you kind of look at people a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And especially myself, I'm a person of color of South Asian descent, so I've never really fit in anywhere, or never really felt like I fit in anywhere. So you're constantly people watching. You're like, hey, if I want to be part of this group, what does that mean, and why do I want to be this way, or why am I choosing these paths? So it's always kind of just an interesting thing. And especially with psychology, it just kind of gave me an avenue to openly discuss things and talk about things because
Right.
psychology and our understanding of our minds and people and everything is constantly changing because we're learning more and more things. It's not like the years of pop psychology, all that kind of stuff has been thrown out. If people are still talking about Freud, they're ridiculous. All that stuff has been debunked like centuries ago.
Gotcha.
Um, but it was always a means to an end, right? Because we never think that we can do what we truly want to do unless an opportunity arises and then we grab it and then we kind of move on with it. I
Mhm.
think it's the same with some of you guys when you're doing full-time streaming. It's like, hey, can this be something? And at this point in time, it can definitely can. You can,
Mhm.
Right.
so many more opportunities in the spaces that we love. I never thought I could make a career in games. Like I thought I had to be an engineer, like a coder. I thought I had to be a sick artist or a sick designer. I am none of those things, by the way. I take credit for other people's work. That's what a producer does, We take credit for other people's works and get our name in the credits above everyone else. So
That is an amazing
Real
perspective. Oh
talk
my
out there. So
goodness,
yeah,
that
just
is
so y'all know,
hilarious.
the talk
this
is
is
real.
Genuine.
That's kind of how it is. And that's kind of how it was. I always just felt like if I want to make this happen and do it, I've got to go wherever it is. I've got to go to make it happen. And the games industry as a whole is so global. Like you guys love JRPGs, you know,
Mhm.
the origins of those, Japan, right? So
Mhm.
if there's an industry there and there's an industry in the US, there's got to be something in the middle too. And there is. You have the likes of CD Projekt Red, and you have the likes of DICE, which is now owned by EA, making Battlefield. There's studios all over the world. And I was just very fortunate to have had very supportive family that were like, yeah, go do it. Go do it. Go do it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
But it's also the
necessary.
kind of mindset.
So
It was also the kind of same mindset too, where it's like, when I was younger, I was single, you know, family was supportive. I can pack up my bags and go. And that's kind of what you have to do in the games industry. You know, you guys are all in Massachusetts, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's that many game studios out there anymore.
Are there
Irrational
any?
used to be there.
What used to be here?
Irrational. Irrational used to be there, the Bioshock guys.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Bioshock. I didn't know that. I didn't even know there was ever any game studios here. Honestly.
Yeah, Bioshock and Kurt Schilling's old studio that made Kingdoms of Amalur. I think they
The
were.
Really?
I remember
2K?
that actually.
BioShock. The main guy, the creator, he lost the IP. No.
Ken Levine.
Yeah,
I don't know what's happening with that. So Ken Levine, I don't know if he was attached to System Shock. Bioshock is the IP is fully owned by 2K, I believe.
Right.
And then Ken Levine wanted to go do something else.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was his in the first place. I
Okay,
think
okay.
2K already owned it.
Okay.
But I think that's a misconception that people kind of make about the games industry. You either got to be mega lucky and grew up and raised in, say, San Francisco or Pacific Northwest or Canada in North America if you want to be in games. Other than that, you got to move. You have to move.
Really? Well, now, why is there such a hard requirement on moving around?
So all that stuff is changing now with COVID and the pandemic.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff has changed. So I've been working from home for the past year, and it was a struggle
Same here.
to trying to get into that mindset of working from home. And a lot of studios work with IPs that are worth potentially billions, and there's a security risk, or we assume there was a security risk. So we need everybody in the office. And for the games industry and game development as a whole, we do our best works when we are in that kind of atmosphere where people are together, we're able to talk about issues or design, so it actually works. So there's always been that push for that. But now stuff is changing. We're starting to understand that we can establish these things and do these things remotely. So it's even better to get into the games industry now because there's a great opportunity that you could do so and then work from home if that is something that you're comfortable with doing and able to be productive doing.
So
But it's
if
changing.
y'all, I know there's a lot of people who watch us or who support us in some way, and they're interested in that realm. So listen, we dropping knowledge on you right now. Dropping some knowledge
go.
on you real quick.
I think it's, to be honest, with the games industry now, it's a lot harder to get your foot in the door. It's a lot harder to go to a big studio and be like, hey, I want to go do this. Even as a tester, like if you think about it, when I was a tester, that they were having difficulty getting people to come in, test games for money. Like this was 20 years ago, almost less than 20 years ago. Now, for every one job in the games industry, there's a good 1,000 people that want that job.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not as easy as it was. And I tell this to a lot of people that I mentor, that I'm very fortunate to have been able to go this path, but it's going to require a lot more work now. And a lot of work. And I always get the same kind of questions like, where can I get started? It's never been easier ever to make your own game, to design your own thing, to do artwork, there's YouTube, there's Udemy, there's Code Academy. Like you could knock out a Mario clone in about 3 hours. That would give you enough. That would give you enough fundamental knowledge to kind of understand how to use Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, how to set up scenes, how to set up these blueprints, all that stuff. And go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's really funny you mentioned that because I've just been noticing this rise of single dev games,
Mm-hmm.
and they end up being
amazing.
bangers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You look at Towerfall was made by one guy.
Oh,
Matt loves games.
I
and
didn't
we
know
love
that.
Towerfall.
get
I
out
love
my
that
head.
game.
Towerfall and Celeste are two of my
Celeste.
favorite games ever.
And I,
ever.
and I, th- and I think Celeste is maximum maybe 4 or 5 people, core people throughout the whole development of Celeste.
Yeah.
Hades is probably 20 maximum.
Yeah.
Like these are kind of games that you can do on a smaller budget or a team that actually wants to work on these things. There's never been a better time. Never ever been a better time. And it's only getting easier and better to do these things all over the place.
Yeah,
And I think you guys are. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say one of our last people we interviewed was a game dev company, indie game dev company. It was literally a couple. It was two, and they had a whole a really good tactical RPG that was on the Switch, and I believe PC as well. But,
Yeah,
yeah,
Fell Seal, right?
Fell Seal.
yeah, fell seal.
Yep, Steam and on Switch.
Oh, that's yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
yep. We
And
interviewed them.
Just them two, and that game's fun as hell.
It was them two in budget.
yeah,
Like, that's it.
Well, if you think about it, like, so I was on Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which was four Ubisoft studios working, chasing the sun.
studios?
Yeah,
Wow.
4 studios chasing the sun development, which is essentially 24-hour development. Singapore being the furthest east starts the day 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
We basically jump into calls and meetings and doing handovers with Montreal, who have been working they've been working there 8 to 10 hours, and they're ready to hand over anything and information. Then we kick off our day. During that time, halfway through the day, we're doing handover with was it Montpellier? It was either Montpellier or Sofia. So another studio in Europe, then doing their handover, and then they're doing their
Wow.
handover with Montreal when they start.
Wow.
This is considered the best Assassin's Creed by most people.
People should consider it the best by all people. It is the best.
No bias, right, D? No bias.
No
bias.
bias. But
No, but no,
Ubisoft
it's
by
a
the end,
special game. Special game.
like it's nuts to think that Ubisoft can do that across so many studios, so many people, and then still get a coherent, cohesive game out of it. And I think they learned a lot of their mistakes from Assassin's Creed 3, which was huge. I think Assassin's Creed 3, by the time it was released, probably had 1,100 people had worked on that game. And I think Assassin's Creed 4 was around about 800 to 1,000 people that had touched that game in an impactful way during the 3 years of production on one of those games. So it's huge undertaking.
And that 24-hour cycle that you mentioned, that's during typically every business day of development?
Yeah, so each studio will have a specific aspect of the game that they own. So Ubisoft Singapore owns ocean tech, all the naval combat, all the underwater, and then some of the side missions. And then the other studios would take on a different aspect or different feature set of that game. Montreal is typically always the lead studio when it comes to Ubisoft. That's where all the editorials, the larger designers, all the veterans kind of hang out at. So they would have had a greater impact on the overall narrative and story, all the main mission stuff. And then all the other studios are working on the underlining tech, all the back end stuff, and all the other stuff to bring it all together. So it allows us essentially to work 24 hours a day, and then be able to share any issues and concerns that we have. And in the hope that by the end of our workday, if we still have some of these issues, another studio could essentially look at it, get some fresh eyes on it, pick it up, and then talk about it. But when you have a game like that, you have 4 studios, production team, and all that kind of stuff has to work together and try and it's like orchestra. It's like being a maestro of an orchestra. You actually have to be so shit hot on your project management and getting all those things in line. Because Assassin's Creed 4, was about 3 years in overall production, but probably around about 18 months of actual development. So all the concepting, all the pre-production, all the planning probably took about 1.5 years. And then the absolute development took around about 18 months, just under 18 months. That's why you see Assassin's Creed games used to come out every year. It's not that we made them in a year. Right. It's like, as soon as Assassin's Creed 2 Brotherhood was done and dusted and released, then pre-production's already started on the Assassin's Creed that's going to come out 2-3 games later. Wow. And that's kind of how that stuff operates. It's the same way that Activision is doing with Call of Duty, because you have Infinity Ward, you have Sledgehammer, you have
Treyarch. Yep.
Right.
Now, how does it go?
You have those 3 main studios.
How does it go if that game doesn't do well? You already have a future game in the works, but the game initially didn't do that well. Do you still continue with it, or do you?
It really depends on. So Assassin's Creed, the first Assassin's Creed was I don't know if you guys remember, it was a PS3 exclusive.
I remember that.
Um,
That was my jam.
and
I briefly played
I
it.
think the original. This is stuff I'm not privy to with Assassin's Creed, but the first one, PS3 was notoriously difficult to develop for,
Mhm.
and I don't believe the return on investment of having an exclusive title, especially from Ubisoft, which is a third party studio that is
Right.
multi-platform. I think at a certain point they were like, I don't. There was not enough PS3s in people's hands, considering Xbox 360 was it that
Smash.
Yeah.
generation.
Crushing it.
So they probably made the conscious effort to kind of go, hey, we're gonna have to release on Xbox. And I think the original, as soon as everyone started loving Assassin's Creed, as soon as they got that kind of feedback, it was like, here's the second one. And then if the second one is successful, what does the third one look like at that point?
Right.
Large publishers have the luxury of taking risks on that kind of stuff, and a lot of publishers were taking risks with IP then. Nowadays it's all sequels, but back then you had to take
Right.
those. um, but I would be surprised if there's any large publisher that's already thinking deeply about sequels before the initial title has been released, unless original there's been enough heat on that though people like, this looks shit hot, and then people are starting to consider it. But Ubisoft can take those risks. Assassin's Creed titles sell 13 to 15 million copies within probably the first half of release.
Mhm.
So you're like, hey, yeah, they can take a risk and start pre-production on
Yeah,
On the next one. Right.
taking
Yeah.
risks.
Wow.
I wish that was in gaming more.
That's we touch on that so often. Like back in the day, like to me, it looks like games are releasing slower. But you kind of just broke it down like how some companies go about doing it.
Mhm.
And one thing is that we keep bringing up, like these companies, the games are kind of samey. There's no more risk involved to try something new or do something different or something like
Why
that.
play a million
You
indies?
don't see it anymore. And
It's kind of like,
it's more the indies are doing that now. They're taking that role of taking risks and things like that.
it's kind of like the movies, right? You always had your summer blockbusters that came out in June, July, and then you had the Fox Searchlights and the Miramaxes that had the kind of art house
Yep.
films. That's what's
like
happening
all the
right now.
Sundance type stuff that would
Yeah,
be actually
yeah.
super good.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know about it until it won an Oscar. You're like, what is this movie? I've
Yeah,
never heard of.
exactly.
And I think we have that right now. Like we had that up until the point. Annapurna is a great example. Annapurna is a movie, essentially a movie studio. They got their starts in traditional media, and now you have Annapurna Interactive that's publishing stuff like Outer Wilds. What happened to Edith Finch? Like all these kind of Donut County. Like I think that's an Annapurna Interactive publishing thing. So you have these places where they're taking risks with smaller studios to get those kind of content in. Because
that.
ultimately the AAA business is nuts. You've got an audience base that loves this kind of game, and you just have to cater to that. So we're not seeing that much in terms of uniqueness, I guess.
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed is typically the same formula, open world formula, and it sells. So why take the risk at that time to do
Yeah.
something else? And that's kind of the sad state of the industry.
You even
unfortunately.
got Square going from the traditional JRPG to starting to make more Western style
Mhm.
action RPGs to try and cater to more of less of a niche and more of the general
The general
population.
populace.
Yeah.
It's like there's that fallacy that games are it costs more and more to develop games, and that's kind of true in an aspect. I don't think it's more on the money side, but it's in time. So when you have these kind of games that look better and they have greater 3D rendering and loading, that's money and time that you need to spend. But if we can go into this another day, I guess. But Activision, that they've been hot on the news at the moment with reporting crazy numbers and crazy growth while still laying off staff. It's unfortunately the kind of the way the industry is with shareholders and trying to keep your stock high and trying to get that in there. We're just not going to see. Ultimately, I just feel that kind of development is just not sustainable. Like you can't sustain 1,000 people working on a game for 18 months, crunch behavior. We know what's happened at Cyberpunk and all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
At a certain point, we need to kind of assess how are we going to be able to build these huge epics that cost hundreds of millions of dollars whilst making sure developers stay alive. You know, it's that kind of.
You saw what
kind of
happened
thing.
at Stadia.
I got a question about that though. Like, you have 1,000 people working on the game, and it's crunch.
Mhm.
What is a feasible amount of people you need to work on a game? Because 1,000 people to me sounds like 600 too many. Like, so
Yeah. So when I say 1,000, typically about 300 to 400 of those people is likely going to be support. So it's going to be extra QA, it's going to be marketing, it's going to be customer support, community management, it's going to be all those other things. But typically you're still going to have around about 600, 700 people, 600, 700 developers on a game like that, on a game that size. It gets nuts. And this is where producers, we're responsible for the most part, of trying to plan out these games and make sure that we can achieve what we are trying to achieve in the time that we have.
Right. That time that you have thing is my big question. It's like how do they decide how much time you have to build a game?
Mm-hmm. All right. So just about every game starts off with something called pre-production or even concept phase, where you essentially have an idea. So if we take what's a good example? So Kingdom Hearts. So we know we want to make a JRPG that typically needs to be 40 to 100 hours worth of gameplay, and it needs to have a certain amount of features and certain amount of systems in play that we know work for a JRPG. So especially places like Square, they've made a couple before, so they already know from those learnings of what they can achieve in that time. And as a studio has been operating over a course of a decade, you understand how much time you can put into 3D animation. You can understand how much time concept needs. So when you start off pre-production, you have a very high level idea of what the game is going to be, how much time, how much gameplay you want in there, what kind of systems you want in there. And then you could typically sit around with a lot of veterans. You sit around your lead engineers, your lead artists, and you kind of break all that stuff down and understand how much time that's going to take. And then producers, along with executive producers and creative directors, we start mapping that out over a course of time. So we'll essentially have a pre-production on Assassin's Creed 4 probably took about just under 2 years, where it's like, here's the first proposal. This is what we want to do. And this is how much time we need to achieve that. Then comes someone from upstairs like, nope.
I knew it. I can see you setting it up. I can see.
So someone comes from above and it's like, oh yeah, this sounds all great, but this new system, this new feature that no one's ever seen before, we can't do that right now because it's a risk. If that breaks and that doesn't work, then that means you jeopardize the whole project, essentially. Then you have to scramble to find something else to fit that time. So when you see Assassin's Creed games, every iteration of that, there's something new. There's something smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right.
And then you get a switch where a couple games from now, you'll see all that into fruition. So if you think about Assassin's Creed 360 generation, you starting from Assassin's Creed 1 all the way to Assassin's Creed 4, they're all the same game, essentially. But in every game, there's an evolution of systems and an evolution of that. And then suddenly you flip the switch and then you get Assassin's Creed Origins, which is like better combat, better this, because the technology has allowed us to achieve that. So yeah, there's a lot of pre-production is the most important part, which essentially allows us to set up what the project is going to be, how much time we need, how much resources we need, what the budget is going to look like, and what we can achieve in that time. And it never goes to plan. It never goes to plan. Like ever. Like there's very few games, even if a game is made by two people, their original vision is never exactly what it's going to be by the end, because you have these pain points. But yeah, it's crazy to think about how all the producers get together, we map out what our teams can do, and then we bring it all together, and then we'll have like a presentation that says, this is exactly step by step, week by week, month by month, milestone by milestone, what we want to achieve. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing when it all comes together. And I think this is why so many of us in the games industry are just like, as soon as it's out, even if it tanks on Metacritic, it's like, we achieved something at least.
Exactly. We finished it. We put it out.
Finished it, put it out. And like Assassin's Creed and the Call of Duties, they're absolute marvels in what you can achieve with good planning. But crunch is the hardest part, because you'll find that you spent 6 months on a system that is not where it needs to be. And it needs to be somewhere, because you've just invested 6 months of maybe 50 people working on it. And that could be $5 million. And then you kind of need to make that work. You start stripping stuff away just to make that thing happen. Otherwise, you start having these really uncomfortable conversations with the big bosses saying, hey, we're not going to hit this date. And when it comes to a large publisher, like, it's not, you have to make it work.
You have to make it work.
Yeah. It's like,
as producer, have you experienced that instance before?
With crunch?
Yes.
So I've done crunch not as a producer. I did crunch as a senior QA lead, which was essentially a QA manager. And this is tough because QA is typically seen as the lowest tier.
What exactly does QA stand for?
That's a good point. Yeah. Point those things out to me, because I might use acronyms that people aren't aware of.
It's all good.
I'm going
to guess quality assessment.
Quality assurance?
Quality assurance. Quality assurance.
I was thinking question and answer, but I'm like, that's probably
no.
not right. So I should ask.
It works. So quality assurance is testing. And I think if chat is listening, I think one of the unsung heroes of game development and game production is testers. It's not just a matter of sitting there and playing the game and going, hey, this sucks. It's like, you might see a wall in a game for 3 months that you're constantly walking into, hoping it doesn't break, or systems and stuff like that. And typically they're the ones that are doing the most hours. They will know the game inside and out. They'll know the game better than the creative directors sometimes, because they just know it. So I did that. So that's when I started off as a tester. And when I was on Assassin's Creed 4, we were entering the crunch. Like, I think I did crunch for 8 months. I think I did 6 to 7 days a week, 10 to 12-hour days for 8 months.
Oh,
wow.
Just
destroyed
months.
me.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, bro.
Yo, I commend you for that.
But you have no choice when you're that, in that hierarchy of production. You want to get somewhere else, you just have no choice. We can kind of talk about that in a bit too. But crunch is tough, because no one ever wants, like, it's never planned to do that. It's never an issue, but somewhere in production and design has failed the whole production line of the game, where a decision was made to include something or not include something that is now we're scrambling to do. And when it comes to AAA, when it comes to these larger studios and larger publishers, these places want to do something and have a new game mechanic to keep their games fresh year after year. So if you're not able to achieve that, then there's going to be some really uncomfortable conversations with teams to say, hey, we need this. We've already sold it. They've already seen this at E3. So what are we going to do about it? And we don't have unions in the games industry, or we do we're starting to, but we don't have these protections like the movie industry does, or the TV industry does, or dock workers do. We don't have that. So either we do it and we survive it, and our mental health is intact at the end of it, so we can continue on another project, or we burn out. And that's what AAA is. AAA is burnout. You do not see. It takes the strongest willed people to stay at a studio like Ubisoft and work on Assassin's Creed after Assassin's Creed over a period. And many don't. Many drop out. And we lose amazing, amazing, talented people who are great benefits to the games industry. And then they go off to go work at Google, where they have work-life balance, or they go work at Facebook where they have work-life balance.
Yeah. I have a question.
So the game industry has lots of
probably not a thing, but I just thought about it because I feel like there should be some kind of reward at the end of all of that. Is there like a crunch bonus check they hand out, or some kind of like they gotta say sorry?
So there is. So if you are a permanent employee, and you have a permanent unlimited contract, most large publishers will have a bonus scheme in place. However, most of those places kind of don't pay out on the bonus until a year after release, or 6 months to a year after release.
Oh my God.
To kind of ensure that you stay and you're still sticking around for the next project.
You're sticking around, right, for the DLC, for the patchwork, for the next project. Oh, that's brutal.
That's
so mean.
terrible.
That's
actually.
crazy.
And
After you just crunched and just burned yourself out to finish the game, the least you could do is like get a little bonus check
Yeah,
and be
for
able
real.
to take a week off.
Throw me a
Oh,
bone.
oh well,
Something.
so in games it's a little bit. I've worked outside of the US where I have benefits more so than what America does. You know,
Gotcha.
I'm working at a place right now where I get 30 days off a year and unlimited sick days and all these kind of things. These are benefits that have
That's amazing.
been assigned by the
What?
government. Yeah, yeah, but by average we get 25 days a year and unlimited sick days a year.
Unlimited
I
sick
just want to
days.
interrupt really quick.
Must
A
be
coworker of
nice.
mine who's actually leaving the company. I work at IBM, and one of my coworkers, he's been there for 20 years. One of the perks of being at the company for 20 years is getting 30 calendar days off the year. You had
That's
to
You got to
work
burn 20 years
20 years of your life
to get
to get
20
a month
days.
off. Yo,
Yeah.
it's wild.
So most places in Europe, you'll start off at 25 days a year, and that's not including the public holidays. That's not including the national holidays. So 25 days a year, and then obviously we have far greater healthcare and insurance that allows us to kind of go to the doctors for either free, well not free because we pay a little bit higher taxes, but we typically have unlimited sick days to kind of just get ourselves right.
You got to bring a
Right.
doctor's note or something to.
Yeah, typically after 5 days, you might be asked to submit a doctor's note. And if it's anything more that requires further care, the government then steps in and then starts paying about 70 to 80% of your salary. So that burden isn't on the companies.
Wow.
So
Brilliant.
Wow.
you know, if something happened to me and I had to be off work for 2-3 months, then the government, because I'm paying higher taxes, the government will step in and pay 70 to 80% of my salary until I get better, and then my job is still secure and safe
Right.
for my return.
Yeah.
So we kind of have those extra little benefits.
That's amazing.
But when you do crunch, it's not paid overtime. Most places don't pay overtime, but you do get days in lieu. So after Assassin's Creed 4, I had around about 35 days to just take off paid.
Woo.
So it wasn't bad,
Not including
as
your
soon as I-
vacation time.
not including vacation.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my goodness.
So,
Wow.
Wow.
but this happens in the US also, in game studios, because you have even the American developers, 20 to 30% of the staff is going to be non-American. They're going to be from Europe, they're going to be from Asia,
Right.
they're going to be from
Mhm.
everywhere. So to stay competitive and to have people stay, a lot of those kind of benefits are still in place for those people. So if they did do a lot of crunch, they do then get time off at the end. But the time that you do crunch, like I was a much slimmer guy before 2013, and I think I gained around about 30-40 pounds from crunch, from just poor eating. You get takeout delivered to the office. There'll be Red Bulls and sodas and
Right.
caffeine drinks,
Oy.
and it just builds on and builds on. So there's a risk to your health by doing those things. Thankfully, that was 7 years ago. I know studios are getting better, but then you suddenly hear about CD Projekt Red and what was
Right.
going on there. So
Mhm.
it's not great yet because
I'll-
there's all these expectations for that stuff.
I also hear that I think Naughty Dog, I believe, is like notorious for doing crunch as well. I think so.
Yeah, so Naughty Dog is a really weird one in our games industry. They essentially, I like to say they have a blank check for whatever they want to do, but there's huge expectations out of any Naughty Dog game now that it has to be
Right.
like, they say that I don't care about Metacritic, but I know I shouldn't say that. I believe that they're always aiming to get that high 80s into the 90s on Metacritic, and that requires a certain amount of dedication and a certain amount of work and time.
Mhm.
It's unavoidable. AAA. I think it's, if you have a set time deadline and roadmap of a project, it's almost unavoidable of crunch. And I don't believe any studio these days outside of them within AAA that says they're crunch free. Either they've got a Bezos paying for their development or they're bullshitting. I just don't believe it.
So
And
you're
the
saying you
crunch-
think every
go
AAA
ahead.
studio is going to be crunch most of the time?
It, kind of, yeah. If they weren't crunching during their development, they sure as hell are if the game gets released and it has an online component. So if you look at Fall Guys,
Oh.
that came out, I don't think they were ready for the success of that game, of like the huge success of it. So that's kind of like, hey, you just made something that everybody loves. Fortnite's an even greater example, right? So if you think about how many people would have worked on Fortnite Battle Royale mode, it was probably 30 people. And they probably had to scale up to 200 within the first 6 months. And to keep up with that demand, to keep up with everything that you need to do and update to make it competitive, that's when all that time comes in. And just to be able to facilitate that, just to be able to get those numbers and that revenue in, it's tough.
Now, where the crunch is typically onset from like either investors or shareholders, like, we need this at this time, despite what the dates you gave us. Like, do you ever see a release from that cycle of some sort?
So crunch happens because we do not have additional time and budget to continue past a certain date or time, or it needs to hit a certain release window to ensure maximum amount of people will get it. And if you look at release dates now, like, I don't know if you guys remember, there used to be a quiet period between February, really December until March, where there was nothing.
That spring,
There was nothing.
Coming into spring, there was nothing.
Yeah,
Just
I remember that.
nothing.
Yeah.
No games.
Now there's at least 4 huge AAA releases a month in that space. And every one of these studios are trying to make sure that they can get out in that specific week or that specific month. Because if they can't, then a GTA might eat them up, or a Call of Duty might eat them up. Like, if you look at Titanfall 2 came out when Battlefield 1 came out. Battlefield 1 ate it up, which was dumb considering it's the same publisher that it was EA. So I guess to break the cycle, it's tricky because you're working for a roadmap, you're working for a budget, and you only have, as soon as you start surpassing that, you're eating into your revenue, eating into potential profit. And this is what we saw with CD Projekt Red, with Cyberpunk. We still, I think everyone who has ever touched it is like, hey, this kind of came out too soon, too early. But it's been in development for 8 years. And let's see, if I'm terrible at math, but if there's around about 300 people working on Cyberpunk at a decent rate for 8 years, and everyone on average is making about 50 to 70,000 a year. So just imagine how much that is costing them up until a certain point. At a certain point, they need to make the conscious decision to say, we got to release it. We got to sell it. And then we can then start fixing stuff in the background, and we can start releasing stuff as it comes out. The only way that we get away from that is if CEOs and shareholders stop taking home the kind of money that they take. Like, games don't need to cost $69.99. That's a fallacy of saying, hey, games have always cost this much. So, they haven't, the price of games hasn't risen in terms of inflation. Games are sustainable, and we can sell them at a decent rate and a decent price.
So you don't think for the next console they shouldn't be $70? You think they should have stayed?
They don't need to be. Like,
wow.
If you look at Bobby Kotick doesn't need to take home 20 million in salary a year and then $500 million in bonuses. Like, he doesn't. No one needs to take that.
Who's Bobby Kotick?
Bobby Kotick is the CEO of Activision Blizzard.
Gotcha. Okay.
So just a couple of years ago, Blizzard had made an announcement that their revenue and profit had seen the greatest growth in 10 years. And then suddenly they let 300 people go. They fired 300 people. And it's like, well, you can't come out here and say you've had record-breaking year after year, and then you fire 300 people, but then your new CFO that you just brought in has been given 50 million in shares, like 25 million in a sign-in bonus, and then is going to be taking home $1 million a year in salary.
Oh my gosh.
And these are the problems that we're having. For what?
Like
CEOs.
Man, I'm sorry. That what is the point? What did you really kill those? What do you kill them off for? That same money that was their salary, like their living, and you want to
give it to one person?
I don't get it. I don't get it.
I can't back it. Like, they're the reason why you're crushing it, right? They made your product. Like,
It sure wasn't you. So, like, why do you? I'm sorry.
developers.
I'm
I
so
think this
heated.
is well. Let me make you madder.
Oh, great.
So this is
Run
kind
it,
of this
run
is
it. Let's go.
This is Trigger
So-
Talk TV. Let's go.
so no one that works in games as outside of executive level is there because they want to make money. Like I can make 3 times what I'm making now at Facebook, at Google, whatever. I'm here because I love games. If you
Mhm.
can see behind me that there's 6 PlayStation 4 Pros there. Like I buy this stuff. I live, dream about games. It's just a big part of my life.
Same, dude.
So we're in this space because we want to make games and we want to share that with people and people get to enjoy it. Like I jump into Assassin's Creed 4 streams all the time just to watch people play it and just see their reactions, and it makes me so happy that I had a rough time working there, but the payoff and the reward is massive to see that people really enjoy it. So you have all these developers who could make triple the amount of money working in traditional software or in web development, but they're choosing to work in games.
Right.
And then all of that money is going to, for Activision and places like that, the revenue that they come in allows them to build more games. Sure. But the vast majority of the positive revenue and profits are going to shareholders, dividends, and is going to executive teams, taking home huge amounts of money. Because we're under this fallacy that Bobby Kotick and CEOs of his type are doing so much for the games industry that we would never be able to build these experiences without him.
Right.
Come on.
No.
Right.
Stop.
Everyone's
see
Gavin
you-
Belson, right? Like there's just a bunch of Gavin Belsons out there now.
Yeah, absolutely. He's
Not
pissed off that he's
actually
being
building
mistreated as a
anything
billionaire.
anymore. Like they used to do things 20, 30 years ago. Now they're just the CFO or the CEO,
Yeah.
just like hanging out.
Yeah. So this is why you see Outer Wilds and Hades. These are people that are veterans from the games industry that just said, fuck it. Let's go do our own thing. Small teams, small contained teams, small budget. And you can achieve a lot more with small systems that have greater payoffs. And something like Hades will probably go on to sell a couple million and make that studio a good amount of money. And I know that studio, was it Supergiant? Will take that money back and will invest it back into their employees, will invest it back into their small team, and will make more great games. We've already seen Bastion, Transistor, the other games are
bangers.
so
My jam.
Never
Super
played either
Giant.
one of them, but I saw them and I was like, "Ooh, those look good."
yeah.
I
So
need you to enter the indie scene, my guy.
oh, for me, it's always been a plan for me to do my thing and have my own studio. It's just
Ooh.
time.
That was
time.
oh my goodness. I was waiting for us to get to a point because that was
Yeah.
one of the major questions that I
Is it?
had for you.
Same.
Being in the
Okay.
industry for 16 years and being a game lover, you just love that you just express your love for video games.
Mhm.
Like, have you wanted to create your own game, and why haven't you yet? If you do,
So I used to want to make my own game, and that's always been an idea, and I always have these ideas, but I'm not an ideas person. I think over the 16 years, I've identified that I'm much more suited to be a producer, to get the best out of designers, to get the best out of other developers. So
Wow.
rather than having my own studio and being a game designer myself, I just don't think there's value there. I don't think I can add the absolute value or create something on my own or with a small team with my vision. But what I would love to do is work more with smaller indies and provide them the information and the knowledge that I have to get them to a place where they can release their games. So instead of having a game studio, I would love to be a publisher that does all the communication between a designer and then helps them to get funding, helps them to realize what their product is and what their game is, and help them to get it out the door and released into people's hands. That's where I believe my value will be. And there's potential for that to happen. I just need to kind of get to a place where I have more time. And that might mean that I leave AAA. That might mean I leave traditional game production and kind of go work freelance or as a consultant for a little bit whilst I get some money together, whilst I kind of build some of this stuff out, because that's kind of where I want to be. All the games that I've been enjoying lately, like I enjoy AAA. I'm playing Mass Effect right now. I'm playing Returnal right now. But man, if I could work for a team like Supergiant with Hades, that'll be amazing. And That's the kind of stuff that I would like to do. Only a
Very
couple years away.
interesting to me because I consider myself as somebody that likes to create things. I can't help it. It's like my brain doesn't turn off. I love creating. And just to hear somebody say that they don't think they can, it's just so weird to me. Like I can't see from that perspective. It's like
Yeah.
your brain, like
It's
you have to have an imagination, no? Like
oh, for sure. Like I can. This is the thing. It's. I definitely have ideas, and I know what works and what doesn't,
Mhm.
in terms of
Right.
production and what can be developed. But there's people that are like kind of in that space way more than I am. That are making board games. They're constantly making designs. They're constantly jotting down and writing things. They're constantly
Yeah.
perfecting their art and speed painting and being concept artists. I'm just not in that mind. I used to think
It's
I
not.
could be,
It's
but
not that you
just
can't
not
do
wired
it.
that way.
It's more of like taking it into like an RPG aspect. Like somebody else is level 70 at that thing, and you might be level 70 at being a producer and bringing the best out of people.
Exactly.
So why
Yeah.
not use your best talent
Mhm.
as opposed to you might only be like level 20 and coming up with a design. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So why not use your best talent to help bring
Yeah.
beautiful games and content to okay.
Fair
Absolutely.
That
enough.
level 70 publisher brain to recruit a level 50 artist designer who will do that part for you. Now
Exactly.
your
Oh, yeah.
party's growing. Yes,
Right, because like
I see the
But
vision.
I would never
everyone's
say
a
I was gonna say that.
fighter, but not everyone has a good coach. You know what I
True.
mean? So get a good
Yeah.
coach.
I think when you see these small indies and like the two people that you guys interviewed before, it's so rare to kind of have that kind of that bond between creatives. That can take years and decades to find the right people to put something together and get something out that you're happy with. It's all about that vibe and that connection and that communication between people. And I know a couple of those people. I work with and I speak and mentor a couple of developers on a weekly basis, and we talk about these things. I don't want to say I would never want to have my own studio and make my own games. I would just have to find the right people that I know we can all benefit from,
Mhm.
rather than me starting to like I've got prototypes upon prototypes that I worked on in Unreal, and whilst doing that, I kind of realized this is cool, but I really like the paperwork. I really like the Excel sheets. I kind of really like making sure all those things come together.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of identifying where your skill set and where your strengths are.
Yeah.
That's it.
You dig that. That's your jam. So go nuts.
Works. Plus, my name will be on the credits above all others.
Like,
you know,
there it is.
like,
There it is.
the level designer is not going to be on the stage of E3. It's going to be me. That gets to talk about it.
That's hilarious.
Let me tell you about what my man's is working on over here.
Yeah, yeah.
You crushed two questions there because I was about to ask what are your personal goals. You said you want to, and you already act upon that. You said you're a
Ooh.
mentor to a
Hmm.
couple of developers like that. So not to like kind of dig in your bag and be like, oh, what do you be saying to these guys? But that kind of is one of the questions for those that you interact with and those that are actually listening, those that are in Discord for aspiring devs. What
Okay.
like let's say they came up to you and be like, what do you have for me? What do you recommend? How would I start out?
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's start out with not having anything, right? You don't have anything and you want to make a game. Ultimately, kind of understand where your strengths and where your mind is at. Like, what is it that you want to make? And then kind of break that down a little bit into what's the simplest solution? What's the simplest version of that first? Like, if you've never made a game in Unreal, you've never made a game in Unity, but you're an artist, or you play a lot of board games, so you understand systems and stuff like that. We'll potentially talk about a project that you could establish, set up, and potentially complete within like a 3-month period. And then we kind of work towards that. Each week you'll come to me and talk about what you've kind of researched. There'll be a point where it's all about references and research before you even touch anything, to kind of understand what it would take to make that thing. And then we start breaking it down. So what's the first step? Okay, so you have a game idea. Maybe it's a 2D platformer like Mario. Cool. So there's plenty of those. We can research those till we go blue in the face. We can make a list of them. We can start making the likes and dislikes of all those things. Great, we've done that. So now we need to kind of figure out where we're going to build it or how we're going to build it. And then we set ourselves some milestones. So maybe in the first week, you'll get yourself familiar with Unreal. You set yourself up some scenes and some cameras and just a very simple 2D World 1-1. That would be your first step. And then we'll talk about it after you've done that, about what your pain points were. Like, how difficult was that? Like, what aspects of building this out, doing the artwork, submitting that artwork in, and then playing, like, what aspects of those were tricky to you? And then how do we kind of improve upon that some more? Um, I'm doing less of that kind of mentoring ship at the moment, because a lot of the people that I'm talking to are now at much greater places and have already established themselves. What I want to do, and this is kind of why my channel existed in the first place, is kind of talk to underrepresented developers or underrepresented people that are in our space that want to make games that typically don't see themselves in these places. I'm a producer now, and everywhere I go, I'm typically the only person of color in a leadership role.
Gotcha.
Now in the US, it might be a little bit different, but in UK and Europe, there's very few of us. And then when we talk about female representation, there's even less. When we talk about the LGBT, there's even less than that. There's a couple organizations in the UK that are doing some really, really cool things. POC in Play, People of Color in Play, is one of them. It's a UK organization, but it's now global. I'll be able to share that link out with you guys. And this is a safe space for people that want to be in games and just want to talk about things, and then have an opportunity to share what they're working on, share jobs and stuff like that, and get people into those places. So
that's amazing.
Ultimately, that's kind of where I want to kind of proceed with a little bit more. And as soon as I have more time, because this project that I'm working on now is taking up a lot of my time, is to kind of get us talking to more people, me encouraging people to go open up Unreal and Unity, open up YouTube, and just go. Like, you could even start with RPG Maker, which is the easiest thing to build something out.
I've used RPG Maker when I was 18 for quite a while. I'm still terrible with it, but I love it.
Made a start.
Yeah, I love it. It's very easy because not only can you like just hop in, make some quick little dumb game, but also you can like go in and actually get really like deep into like scripting and things like that. I mean, you can't make some AAA game, but like you can really customize it.
And the better part about that, back when me and Key were using RPG Maker, there wasn't too much support for it, or if there was, you had to go out and find it. Now I can go onto Humble Bundle, and they're selling asset packs that I could just use to import, and now the game could look better.
You can do that in Unreal and Unity too. They have like the storefronts, and there's a bunch of free assets. You could build something out with a bunch of free assets.
And the Paragon assets on there.
Paragon assets, right?
Just saying, about $17 million worth of assets.
Exactly. So it's getting people to start thinking like, we need more people that kind of look like us in games to kind of have this opportunity to sell and say greater things and get that representation in, because there's still still studios that do a pretty shitty job with characters. There's still studios that do terrible things. But ultimately, like when I talk about what I want to do in the future, that's what my publishing place would be, is getting an opportunity to work with underrepresented developers and getting them into a place where we can talk to some publishers, or we can try and think out what government aid there is. Out here in Europe, there's so many grants and stuff like that for people in arts to use, but people aren't aware of it. Like,
we were looking that up. There's a couple like foundations and things that will like that will look at your game and decide to give you grants or funding for your game. That's so sick.
Absolutely. So it's that kind of place that I really want to, I kind of really want to be in. And when it comes to mentoring, it's just to be your biggest cheerleader. That's what a producer is. If people don't know what a producer is, we are cheerleaders. We are essentially facilitators. We make sure that our teams have everything they need to get their job done and to reduce as much stress as we can for those people. And that's why when you talk to me about having my own studio, this is where my value is. I will be your biggest cheerleader. I'm Mr. Optimistic until, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment comes when you don't do what you're supposed to be doing. But other than that, that's where we should be.
I can dig it.
That makes sense to me.
Gotta get it done.
Yep, go ahead.
Now, I know you're playing some stuff right now, but what games are you excited for in the future? Like, what's coming out in the near future that you're like, yo, I need that. I have to play that.
All right. I feel myself getting older. And with that, I'm starting to get really set in my ways about what I like and enjoy. Like I'm finding that with music now. Like I've hit that point where I don't care about new music. I'm just going to listen to stuff that was pre 2002, and that's how
Same.
my Spotify is now. So, uh, Ninja Gaiden Collection is the one I'm looking forward to the most, which is just a remaster.
Ooh.
Just a remaster. Nio or Neo, however you want to say it. I love that game a lot, and this is Team Ninja made Nio. Ninja Gaiden Black was probably one of the very first games that I played that was a true challenge.
That
Like
game
a
was tough.
true challenge.
Mega
And
hard.
like the first boss is the hardest boss in the whole game of Ninja Gaiden. Like as
That's
soon as
funny.
you've accomplished that, it's like, okay, this is ready. And Ninja Gaiden's like predates Souls games in terms of difficulty and having to go at it. That Ratchet and Clank, I'm kind of looking forward to.
That's what I'm.
I think
Kind
that's
of.
it. Well, yeah, I am looking forward to. Sorry,
Just want to clarify,
that's
that's
what
all.
I'm looking forward to.
And,
The only thing that I'm really excited about, which I by the way, I don't know if it's happening. This is speculation that I want it to happen, is a Bloodborne 2.
Bloodborne
okay.
2. I never that never even
ooh.
thought never even crossed
So-
my mind. I didn't even get to finish
Yeah.
playing Bloodborne 1. Thanks, Mick. But um
Ooh,
you ever
this
let
is
a
so
friend borrow a
subject.
game and never see it again?
Bloodborne 2.
Yeah. See,
I
now
think that
you
would be it.
you brought another question in my mind. This could actually end up being an entirely different conversation.
Mhm.
But how do you feel about difficulty in video games from
Ooh.
then to now?
Hand holding. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, hand holding. All right, this is gonna be. This might split the room, I guess.
Let's do it.
Good.
So I appreciate difficult games. I absolutely appreciate the difficult games, and I find huge reward in accomplishing something that's
Mhm.
taken me hours, maybe days, maybe weeks to do. I
Mhm.
think that's a beautiful aspect of games, and there's obviously games out now like Souls that provide that kind of risk and reward and reward for the time that you spent in there. Um, Games have definitely gotten a little bit more accessible, which I think is an absolutely great thing.
Mhm.
I'm getting older, so I don't have 8 hours a day that I can spend playing games. I just don't have that time anymore. So if there's quality of life improvements in something, then I welcome them. Like, objectives on a mini map or something like that tells you to do that on some aspects of games. I don't mind that.
Yeah. That's
Um,
it.
I think I wonder if you're getting at the fact that there's been a lot of talk about having an easy mode or a lesser difficult mode in games. Um, I feel like games should have that. Um,
I agree with that.
I
Mhm.
especially Dark Souls, and this is tricky. I would love as many people as possible to experience games, and especially when it's in the AAA space, when it's has an X amount of budget that's in the excess of 50 million and it's meant to reach the widest of audiences. I think developers and production places should take the necessary effort to make at least accessibility features. And PlayStation does incredible stuff with that.
Yeah, I agree with the accessibility, but question, because I don't remember. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, do they
Demon
have
Souls?
the huh?
Even so,
Demon Souls.
Well, I've never played Dark Souls before. I've only
Yeah,
played Demon
yeah.
Souls. But do they have difficulty settings?
no.
No, right?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay. So and you
I
think
think
those games should have difficulty settings?
I don't think it would hurt it. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on with kind of a lot of those games. A lot of people feel like they belong to a specific club because they were able to complete this game, and most people could. I don't think it necessarily hurts a game like that to have, especially because Sakura has a very strong narrative, to
Yeah.
have a way to play that in a lesser way that at least lets you accomplish completing the game.
See,
Because
I mean, I agree there. It's just for me personally, like I said, I've only played Demon Souls, and not that I've got like super far, but like I to this day, I don't even know what the story is of Demon Souls. I just run around and I'm just like fighting
Souls
people.
games don't have good narrative.
That's what I feel like. Like these Souls games are just you're just playing the game because it's difficult and to level up and to kill these
Yeah.
giant monsters. Kind of like there's no like hardcore story with it. But
you
like
know,
something with Sekiro, like I can see there being a difficulty meter in that because it actually has a
yeah.
story and a strong narrative to it.
Game
And I
really.
and I think that's where it should happen. If a game, if you're not, if the narrative is not a strong part of that game, then I'll watch someone on Twitch play it, because then I still get to experience all the beautiful aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right.
But something like Last of Us should have an easy story mode. Something like Mass Effect should have a story mode where
I agree.
combat is not an important thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a fine balance. I want people to experience. I want more and more people to experience games and play them. And we have trophies and achievements. So hey, if you play Sakura or the Souls game as intended, you'll get the platinum trophy. Like
Right.
I think
Mhm.
that should be something that we do. Yeah, I guess that's my answer to it. I want more and more people to play games, but it's I don't think everything deserves an easy mode. Like I still play I still play Pac-Man DX Championship Edition,
Pac-Man.
and try and get and I try and get like the greatest score. Like I don't see a game like that having an easy mode. It's
Right.
some games are Assassin's Creed. You can play that on easy mode, and
Mhm.
that's by not stealthing, by not getting 100% completion
Right.
on all those kind of things. So it's a way to kind of use game mechanics to make it as accessible as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Like games are like they're personal, right? Like you spend time with them and they affect you in certain ways, maybe emotionally, whatever they do. So I think you should be able to play and enjoy them at your own way, in your own way.
Mhm.
So like if I'm having a conversation with Key about like we're just like, yo, we just want the hardest game, the hardest difficulty. Cool, but there's also people who just want to enjoy the story and don't
Yeah.
and aren't necessarily as adept in playing video games.
Yeah.
So it's like, why not allow them to enjoy the game as well and be able to just play through the story?
But see,
I think there's go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say,
Sorry.
like, because I think thinking about it now, like I've always complained about the difficulty in Kingdom Hearts, which is I hate it because it's even though you're on the hardest difficulty, when you start the game off, you throw in teacups and roller coasters and like just wild stuff. I'm like, and I thought
Yeah.
that was the tutorial of the game. I thought after like I get to the game, it was gonna be all taken away, but no, this is throughout the whole game, and I'm like, what is going on with this game? But like, I feel like if I'm on the hardest difficulty, I shouldn't have gotten that at the beginning of the game. But if I'm playing it on easy, then they could have given me all of those summons and all that extra stuff
Mm,
that I was given. I
yeah.
think that would have been a better way to do that. Thinking about it now.
That makes sense too.
Or even if you give me that tool, give me more enemies, more HP, like give them
Yeah.
more HP, make them hit harder and things of that nature. So even if you give me the tool, let them be able to decimate me, even though I have that tool.
I think there's a lot of talk about this where I think a lot of gamers feel that if a Souls like was to add difficulty modes, then that means the developers are going to have to do a lot more balancing and a lot more
Ooh.
care on that,
Uh-huh.
which would take them away from something else.
Hmm.
And I think that's the argument that a lot of people
Is it true?
choose, and
Yeah.
it can be. One of the toughest parts of game development is optimization and balancing at the end, especially when you have difficulty modes. That how do you make this compelling enough for every difficulty mode? MMOs have this. I think the greatest example I can give you is World of Warcraft with their dungeons. You have difficulty modes from like Mythic and all that kind of level. So when you're building something out like that out, you have to take into consideration how does this play on easy? How does this play on medium? And then what are we doing to make sure that it all works together? And there's a
Right.
power growth, you know? So there's a lot more time that would be involved, but there's still balancing that happens all throughout development for stuff like that. I think studios would probably just have to spend a little bit more time, a little bit more money on doing so, to
Mm,
kind of get that into play.
Do
Like
you,
everything costs money.
do you
Everything
feel
costs
as
money
right.
and time.
do you feel as though even though um there are still like there's difficulty games or difficulty modes and difficult games, do you feel as though games are generally easier even though you're playing on the hardest difficulty than they were back in the day?
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
are.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that was kind of my question. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know. It might have been one of you guys, or might have been Jay Negative that was playing Mega Man.
That was
Like,
that was Jay
there's
or yeah.
Jay,
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
right.
Hmm.
Come on, I don't think there's anything that is more challenging than the original Mega Man series. and how unforgiving that was for the most part, especially with checkpoints and having to start all over again.
Oh, we did have
But the
Reese playing Mega
original,
Man 3.
That was me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was you.
That
the
Yep,
original
we had
Mega Man,
Reese play
yeah.
Mega Man 3. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
And one thing that we talked about back then was like, it was, why was the game difficult? Was it really the developer's intention for the game to be that hard? Because this was the NES. The NES had limitations. So there was, and I remember this to this day, I'm never going to forget it. I was on one of the final stages and I jumped down and I literally clipped the corner of a frame. It wasn't a hazardous frame, but it killed me. And I'm like, okay, is that the game being difficult? They really want you to be like pixel precise? Or is it like, oh, they didn't really want to code that block so that it's not fatal, so they just left it alone and things like
I don't
that.
think games are difficult because of
And then Key's like, okay, because of, I don't think the limitations are what is increasing a game's difficulty.
So, so I've listened to a lot of GDC talks over the years, and you get to have these kind of conversations with some like veteran developers, and some of these guys who are now like in their 50s and 60s that were making these games like in the 90s will tell you that a lot of them were building these games out to be challenging, to be really challenging. And for the most part, some of these designers were like, we need to build this out that will be challenging for me. And some of those early games, you can tell that they were built because the designers wanted to play those. Like, it's not like Assassin's Creed where you can't tell me that every 1,000 people that have worked on an Assassin's Creed title loves Assassin's Creed.
No.
Like, it's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some of the labor of love games, you can tell that, oh, this is difficult because they probably tested this level and were like, yeah, and they were challenging each other to see how quickly they could do it or where they could add little bits to really fuck with you. Limitations are one thing, and I think that's why some of the early games you only have like 2 or 3 different systems in place. You can jump and you can dash, and that's pretty much about it. And sometimes when QA goes through these things and they see these little bits that just like absolutely fuck with you, like that little ledge, I'm like, nah, let's just keep it. That will learn him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody in the know. Thank you, because I never agreed with that.
We need someone in the know for these things.
Never
because,
agreed with
he was pretty adamant about that. And
well, it depends, right? So you have 2 trains of thoughts with it. It's like, oh, this shouldn't happen, so let's fix it, or like, this is kind of funny when it happens, and it's really going to piss off that person that does it, but then they're going to learn. Like, you know. And I think you see that in indie games. You see that in like Hades and places like that, where it's just like, that shouldn't have happened, but you learn from it. And those kind of roguelikes, you're like, I'm not going to do that again. And that's kind of the genius of what games used to be, is that discovery that this thing is going to hurt me, or this thing is a secret area. It's that discovery that kind of makes you fall in love with
this is why I love roguelike games now.
It's why I play them, right? Because they give me that old Nintendo heart. Because AAAs don't really do that. Like, they don't really do that for me anymore. Like, I usually walk them. Like, one sitting, I'll probably beat it. Maybe 2. I'll just walk, like, on the hardest difficulty, just beat it. Like,
But roguelikes, I'll die 1,000 times.
Right, like Hades. Like, I still haven't gotten the end game in Hades.
No, me neither. I've got 12 hours in. I got single player.
I got to the first escape in one sitting after stream. I just sat down, just walked it. But if I go play Hades, that's not happening for me.
Nope.
It's way more challenging for me.
I kind of like that, because I'm in the same kind of boat where I did not enjoy roguelikes at all. I just didn't.
Yeah.
And it's purely because of time and other commitments that I couldn't invest into getting better at it. And then I started playing Dead Cells, and I'm like, oh, okay, there is something to roguelikes.
That's a good one.
There is something to roguelikes. And then Returnal hit, and now I'm like, okay, I kind of like roguelikes, you know. And especially with Returnal, I love bullet hell shooters, especially the treasure ones. So give me Radiant Silvergun or give me Ikaruga, then like, I'm shit at those games.
Reese's jam.
But I will play like, I'm terrible at Ikaruga, but I will spend an evening trying to get better. That's
so
it.
Will I. That game's almost impossible, but I will sit there and try.
Sit there and try. And even if I don't get anywhere, I'm just like, okay, I accomplished this one little thing, and I'm happy with that, and then I'll come back to it. And it's just one of my favorite experiences.
Gotcha. Yeah, like Reese put me onto that. Like, I feel like
I ruined this man's life.
Reese put me on to like the kind of like the bullet hell scene or whatever, but the indie scene as a whole, like I I forget the name of this weird indie game that I played for PS3 when the PS3 first came out. Got one, and I played this weird game. I forget the name of it. I'll find it for you guys. And then I hadn't really played a proper indie since that moment. And I think it was like 2013, maybe 2011.
Somewhere around that.
Reese got me into. He was like, "Yo, check this game out." It was like some weird game called Dust Force.
Dust Force.
It was just
Dust Force, the sweeper.
fun.
Yep,
the
the sweeper.
Yes.
Yep.
Love it.
Yes,
love it.
I love that game.
It's good.
And that game,
And he
on,
hasn't.
I just couldn't stop.
He hasn't let go
Super
of indie
Meat Boy,
since.
Fez,
Nice.
Braid. It
I
just
love it.
didn't stop. Bastion, it
Splunky, Cave Story, like all
Yeah.
those obscure and love.
didn't
Mhm.
stop.
You guys need to play M++ together.
Yes, Reese.
We're gonna
spoke
do
about
that.
Amazing.
We're gonna do that. What system is that on? I'll get it right now. Whatever.
PS4
Done.
or
I'm gonna buy
PC.
it right now.
I think it's on
I'll get it
PC
right
also. It's local. I think it's got local. It's local co-op and online co-op, I believe. And I was playing that on my stream, and I think B jumped into my stream and was just like, "What is this?" I was like, "It's M++."
And I was like, I need to be playing this, right?
Husband and wife team, and incredible game, amazing
Let's do it,
soundtrack.
Reese. Husband and wife team. Let's run it.
We're gonna run that.
Beautiful.
Oh, I see what you're doing here.
Let's go. So now you've worked on at a bunch of different companies, and I'm sure you've worked on different platforms. What was your favorite platform to work on? What have you like on
Ooh.
what platform did you release? Like, I like the way this works, even though it might not have been your personal favorite game that you
Okay.
worked on. That platform slapped.
So I entered the games industry in 2005. So
Yep.
Xbox 360 had just come out 2005. So I was at EA as a tester, and I was working within the online and network team. So we were doing a lot of testing for online capabilities of games and then multiplayer and stuff like that. And I had an amazing group of coworkers, and we were testing. We were playing a lot. We were playing stuff like Fight Night, testing Fight Night round three.
Ooh,
Okay.
Battlefield,
Wow.
Battlefield Bad Company, Battlefield 2142, what's it? Def Jam Icon, like all these kind of multiplayer stuff. And it was just a really awesome time to just be getting paid to test games, and then working with awesome people. And then we were playing like multiplayer stuff early, and just kind of working with that. It was just really good memories of kind of going to work. It's like, oh, it's Battlefield Bad Company time. There's 16 of us in a room together, like a mini LAN party. We're working, we're trying to identify all these issues and kind of do all these tests. But those moments where we get to jump into game and just kind of enjoy games together, that was probably the most fun time. And Assassin's Creed 4 was the last big game that I worked on, and that was development. The lead development platform was Xbox 3, was PS3. So PS3, Xbox 360. So that was still released. So yeah, last 2 generations ago.
Cool.
Yeah. Like I wish I could have worked on like Dreamcast, but I was too young. Like
Oh,
that would have been
man.
the dream.
Can we get a Dreamcast 2, please?
Sega, we know you're out there. You
Insane.
can do hardware again. It's okay. Just don't do those
Dreamcast
mini consoles
2.
again, because we don't know what y'all were thinking.
The
But
people are
Dreamcast
asking
2,
for it.
Was it like a little Sega Saturn?
The
Is
little
that what it
mini
was? Or
Sega,
a
no,
little-
like Game Gears, weren't they?
It was
Game
it was a
Gear.
Game
It's
Gear
like this
Micro.
big.
Game Gear.
Yeah,
It's
you had
smaller
to
than the
collect
Game Boy
all
Micro, I
4 of
think.
them because they
Yeah.
had different video games
It was
on
like
them. And if you
an inch and a half big, something like that.
crazy,
Dude, it was a keychain.
it was like this
I
big.
don't
Yeah,
know.
it was literally
Yeah.
like this big. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, like a key fob, like a car key fob. Yeah.
A car key fob. That's fair.
That's pretty fair.
That is
Yeah.
fair.
Oh man,
What is y'all's favorite platforms?
Platform like
Favorite
consoles.
platform?
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, for me, it's Xbox. I've got both consoles, and I haven't used my PS5 in quite some time. But I mean, neither one of them have games, but at least I can play games on my Xbox. I can all the way back to the OG Xbox. But before
That-
this, huh?
no, go ahead.
Oh,
You said
before this, I've been PlayStation from 1 all the way to 4.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to pick one individual platform, it would probably be the PS4. Believe it or not, like I'm hoping it's the PS5 because that dual sense is just change. It adds another layer to gaming that just the Xbox Series X doesn't have. That thing is crazy, but that's to come. But so far to be the PS4, I think PS4 I spent the most time online with friends playing beautiful experiences. So it would have to be the PS4 for right now.
PC.
PC
The
Master
all-rounder.
Race.
I've always
Oh,
been
yeah.
like split between PC and PS, but more recently I've been on my PC more.
Yeah, I think it's Dreamcast and the Dreamcast and PlayStation are kind of neck and neck for
Okay.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Because PS1, like I was a PC gamer until the PS1 kind of came out. So I played a lot of stuff like LucasArts games, like point and click adventure games. And then
Broderbund.
Quake. What's that?
No, Broderbund. There are a lot of like
I don't
kids
know that.
games that I played on,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Zumbinis.
Zumbi's the little purple things.
Yes.
Little
Oh, yeah.
purple yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now I
That
remember.
was a slapper. I used to play that in school.
Oh, I love that game.
So I was always into Quake, like Quake 2, Quake 3. I was massively into. But when the PlayStation, like a funny story is like I actually got a Saturn before I got a PlayStation 1. And
Same thing.
I didn't like it, and I traded it with a friend.
You didn't like your Sega Saturn?
I didn't. The funny thing is, I like the Saturn now. Like I like the Saturn, like 6 years after I got rid of the Saturn. I was like, oh shit, the Saturn's amazing with all these bullet hells, shooters, and 2D
I
fighters.
didn't get any time with my Sega Saturn, dude. I had it for like a little bit, and then my sister poured Diet Pepsi into it, and then that was it. Like that was it for that. We weren't getting another console. Like that was it.
But PlayStation 1 for me, it was. I can tell you the game too, and we talked about it, I think Keys. I can't remember. Like I'm always in your channels. I don't remember who. Twisted Metal.
Twisted
Metal.
Ooh.
Oh, we was recently talking about
Yeah.
that on Trigger Talk TV.
Trigger Talk TV.
Yeah, I love me some Twisted Metal.
that's it.
Twisted Metal Black specifically, but
Oh, I played them all, 1 through 4 on the PlayStation, and then PS2 Black.
I only played the first two.
All of them.
Never
I
got to
enjoyed
play Black.
all of those games so much.
Yeah, and that was kind of the change into going to more console for me, and then that's just how it's been.
Twisted Metal, that's sick. See, that's the coolest thing about games, right? It's like it's not always the same titles that bring people in. It could be anything. Super dope.
Yeah, it's because I got my PS1, I got Resident Evil, and then I had no money for a memory card. So I don't know if you guys remember the intro for Resident Evil, and it's like 20 minutes long of no music and just this echoey conversations of that intro when you go into the manor. So I had to keep my PlayStation 1 on for days so I could continue with it. And then my mom would come around and turn it off because she sees the green light. And I'm like,
no.
The pain.
Oh man, where would we be without video games, man? These fond memories of losing hours of data due to a mishap,
Friends saving over your save data,
over your save data, your console not reading your disc because it's too
take out the cartridge and blowing on it.
Bro,
thereby
finding out
ruining
now that did absolutely nothing, but in your soul, it fixed the game.
It fixed the game.
I still like to believe it fixes the game.
It fixes the game.
It
absolutely fixes the game.
I don't care what anyone says.
It definitely fixes the game.
Oh man.
All
But all right, you guys want to start wrapping up?
This has been an extremely awesome conversation, but there's more. I think there's more conversations that we can have with you.
100%.
There's definitely more. So we will definitely be having you back. But this has been great.
Do you have any final words? Do you have any shout outs, any plugs? Go ahead and throw them, man.
I'll plug my channel. So the Dee Patel, my channel it's actually called Environment versus Player. It's a flip of player versus environment. Several years ago, I had this funny idea that, for a lot of us gamers who are typically underrepresented in these spaces, it can often feel like the environment is against us. And so I will be starting a podcast fairly soon, supported by BAFTA. I am a member
Ooh.
of BAFTA, and we want to do a thing together where
What
I
is
talk to
BAFTA?
other. BAFTA is the British and Film and Television Association. It's kind of like our Oscars.
Oh,
They
that's
actually just
awesome.
had BAFTA recently, and there was a video game that got nominated. I forget which one.
we have BAFTA games, so we have
Yep.
Hades won best
Hades
game.
won.
Hades
Yep.
won it. Yep.
Yep.
So what's going to happen is I'm getting it all a list together of other developers of color, and we're going to chat, and we're going to have just kind of like a conversation that y'all had with me, where we talk about background with games that we kind of love and why we're still in games, and some of the crappy stuff that happens here and there. But for my channel, it's chill. Like I'm very fortunate that I kind of have this career and this job, and come hang out. All we get to do is talk, and it's chilled, and we support each other in terms of mental health, and we're just going to have those kind of moments where we just talk about those things, and that's it. And always feel free to ask me anything, in terms of games. I'll give you an honest answer, or at least give you some resources that you can read and then read up on yourself, and I think that's quite important. And ultimately, if you've ever thought of making a game and you're always amazed by other things, or you are like, hey, I saw that and I thought of that 5 years ago, like, go make something. And if you need a hand and someone to tell you how to go
Oof.
about it,
I can tell
I
you
will
the
help
amount
you.
of instances that happen with me. I swear to you. I literally have files in my computer. I got dates, but
Like notepads of like, hey, here's an idea.
yes,
Um,
absolutely, 100% WordPad. But yes,
Yeah. So you know where to find me on my channel. Just drop me a whisper if you're genuinely interested about potentially making something or just being pointed in the right direction. I will absolutely help you. I'm also in y'all's Discord under the D-pad. Drop me a message if you really consider it, because there's never been an easier, greater time to start building stuff and making stuff. And if you need just encouragement on a weekly basis and a call that's for 30 minutes where I tell you to buck up and continue, then I'll do that too, just to see more of us in this space.
listen, we
There's
are
a lot of
definitely
us.
going to have the D-pad back, and we're going to have
Anytime.
some viewer questions. So make sure you guys get your notepads, get your brain. If you have any questions for the D-pad, get them loaded up for the next time that we have him on. Because as you can see, he's very open to answering questions, and he's very helpful and wants to see people succeed,
try.
which I love.
I
That's
do.
what-
I want to be good. But thanks for having me on. Like, and I'm so glad to have found y'all's community, and it's pure like happenstance where I've only just started getting into Twitch. I don't know what the Twitch etiquette is or anything like that. Key Stream showed up in the recommended channels, and everyone was so dope in your channel and being so sweet. And then I met B dropped by, Reese dropped by my channel. We just chatted, and I think that's the kind of wonder about it. So appreciate y'all for doing what you do on a daily basis, weekly basis. It's awesome to see y'all in this space. It's awesome to see your community also responding, and I love it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
I want to thank you for coming by and being a part of it. Like your help and your knowledge and wealth of knowledge is just amazing.
And
I've
if you
learned so much just from this last 2 hours I've been with you.
if you
I
would
got
like to find the D-pad, you can find them on Twitch at the DDEEPAD. Are you still playing Returnal on stream? You still streaming Returnal?
No. So I'm not doing that on stream no more, because I don't like to be made to look like a fool. So that is completely offline right now. But plus, dude, I don't do well with horror, and that game is freaking me the fuck out. Like the house. I won't go into details about it.
Yeah.
I'll likely write an expose about my life and biography later on when I get older that talks about how I'm scared of everything. But no, Mass Effect is what I'm playing at the moment, and I'll
Oh,
probably
I
stream
love
a little
that.
bit later today.
I need to play that
Yes.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to be what's happening.
He also enjoys playing what is it? EverQuest, right?
Yeah, but I've had to take a break because I was putting in 4, 5, 6 hours a day playing because I'm so hooked on it. It's like my
EverQuest,
childhood.
guys.
EverQuest.
EverQuest.
So good.
Right.
EverQuest.
It's so good.
Right.
It's so good. It's so good. Like,
Oh,
I
man.
can't. Oh, I shouldn't promote it. It will destroy people's lives. It almost took me again. So we're taking a little break.
All
It was
right.
close. Yeah, it was close. It was close to
close.
grabbing you up.
Oof, yeah.
But yeah, with that being said, guys, thank you guys for tuning in on another one of our side quests. This has been Trigger Talk TV.
Trigger Talk TV.
Trigger Talk TV.